Welcome to our latest Wandering Walks of Wonder History Walking Tour. Today we're headed to Lexington, Missouri. Downtown Lexington may strike you today as a quaint, quiet version of Main Street, but it hasn't always been so. Santa Fe traders and steamboat captains once strutted along these streets. Horse-drawn wagons and ox carts stood in lines blocks long waiting to load their produce on riverboats or cross the Missouri River by ferry. In September of 1861, thousands of Southern troops marshaled here preparing to do battle, cheered on by crowds waving Confederate flags. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, coal miners and college boys flocked to the saloons, billiard halls, and bordellos of the notorious Block 42 on Main Street. By turns, downtown Lexington has been boisterous, billiobless, and rowdy, but never boring. Lexington was founded in 1822, just a year after Missouri had become a state. The original town was about a mile to the east of here and soon became a major stop on the Santa Fe Trail, which started in central Missouri. As steamboat traffic increased, a new town center was laid out in 1836 closer to the river. Soon, many substantial brick churches, commercial buildings, and homes were built, and in 1847 work began on the new Lafayette County Courthouse. This Greek Revival structure that we see today and we're walking past was completed in 1849 and is the oldest courthouse in Missouri still in use. Be sure to read some of the historical markers in front of the building if you come into town, and of course, take a picture of that famous cannonball in the courthouse column, high up in the far left column of the portico, which has become the symbol of Lexington. The story of the cannonball dates back to 1861 when an estimated 16,000 or more pro-Southern Missouri State Guard troops entered Lexington, commanded by Major General Sterling Price. They came to do battle with the 3,500 Federal troops who had fortified the bluffs about a quarter-mile northeast of downtown. By capturing Lexington, General Price aimed to control the Missouri River, allowing pro-Southern volunteers to cross over from northern Missouri and ultimately lead Missouri out of the Union and into the Confederacy. Before the battle, the 6th Division of pro-Southern Missouri State Guard was lined up down 10th Street all the way to the river where they captured a steamboat. Meanwhile, Federal troops were bombarding the downtown area with cannons from their fortified positions on the bluffs. Churches, businesses, and homes were all hit. One cannonball went right through a cast iron safe in a business office, and a bystander lost his leg to another cannonball. And another ball hit one of the stone columns of the courthouse, leaving a large dent. About 50 years later, an old man appeared before the county commissioners with a cannonball. He swore that as a young man he had picked up this ball on the courthouse lawn during the battle, and that it was the ball that had struck the column. The county commissioners had the ball attached to the column with an iron rod where it has remained ever since. Claims that it was really just a croquet ball painted black were refuted when the courthouse was recently painted, and painters struck the ball with a hammer, getting a true iron ping in return. As we walk into the commercial district, we'll see that some of the buildings that were standing at the time of the battle are still here. Many, though, have been modernized or replaced in a wide range of architectural styles. In fact, across from us here in front of the courthouse on Main Street is an example of a Queen Anne commercial building that probably dates back to the 1880s, with elaborate cast iron ornamentation and an oriel window projecting from the second floor. Right next door is a former bank building that is a great example of the Beaux Arts style, characterized by classical form, symmetry, and rich ornamentation. Here at 11th and Main, the building that we see originally was a silent movie theater and features a single cast iron column at the corner entrance. It's thought that this is where Carl Stalling played piano for the silent films. Carl Stalling was born here in Lexington in 1891 to German immigrant parents. He grew up to be the composer for the famous Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoons featuring Porky Pig and Bugs Bunny. The next building on the right has been restored to its turn of the century appearance. Another building that we're walking past was built in 1869 and is a great example of a Italian style commercial building, Italianate style commercial building. Take a look at some of the cast iron window heads on the second floor with those arch sashes and window panes, as well as the decorative cast iron storefronts. Across the street from us on the north side of Main Street is a tall yellow brick building that is a Beaux Arts structure that long served as a Montgomery Ward department store. You will notice the terracotta Masonic symbol above the entrance to the lodge remains because upstairs it was used as lodge rooms. Here at the corner of 12th and Main is a church that dates back to the 1839 when it was originally built as the Christian church. In about 1870, it became the Second Baptist Church and was rebuilt in 1893 in the Romanesque revival style. This is the only remaining African American congregation in Lexington after several were organized after the Civil War. Across the street is a building that was constructed in 1858 as the First Baptist Church, but was not completed until after the Civil War. You can notice the cast iron brackets, windowsills, and lintels on the building. This revival structure originally had a large bell tower that was removed in 1905 after construction of lighting. This ornate fence that we're walking past originally fronted the William Morrison residence, one of several fine pre Civil War homes that originally stood here on this block. The fence was undoubtedly cast at the Morrison Foundry located near the Missouri River. Prior to the battle, federal troops burned the foundry since it had produced cannonballs for the Missouri State Guard. After the war, the foundry was rebuilt and continued to produce cast iron fences, storefronts, and ornate ironwork. Across the street from us here at 13th and Main is a 1912 example of Beaux Arts architecture that originally served as the U.S. Post Office here in Lexington. Interesting peepholes allowed the postmaster and postal inspector to monitor each room for misconduct, even in the employee bathroom. At the time, all employees were male, though. The building was later headquarters of the school district and a commercial business that it is today. Next door is the Lexington Historical Museum, a brief revival structure building with a distinctive bell tower. It was built in 1846 as the Cumberland Presbyterian Church and later served as a boys' school and a library. Today, it serves as the historical museum that has many interesting exhibits inside on such things as the steamboat era, the Osage Indians, the Pony Express, and the Battle of Lexington. Inside the museum, you can see a sword that was worn by Commander James Mulligan. Christ Church Episcopal is a great example of the Gothic revival style with its pointed arch windows and buttresses on the walls. The main part of the church was built in 1848, and still has the original oiled walnut pews and altar rail, plus elaborate stained and painted glass windows and an organ that came by steamboat from St. Louis in 1867, having originally served in the cathedral there in St. Louis. The octagonal tower with a crenellated peritop was added in 1890. Here at the northwest corner of 13th and Franklin is Heritage Park, which commemorates the steamboat Saluda, which blew up at Lexington's Upper Landing in 1852 and is considered to be the worst disaster ever on the Missouri River. Nearly 100 people were killed, including many Mormons going to Salt Lake City. The funeral for the victims was held at the Episcopal Church just across the street from us. Orphan children were adopted by Lexington families. As you go through the park, a bronze plaque tells a story of the disaster and lists the victims as far as they are known. The bell in the tower that we see is one that was identical to the one used on the Saluda and shows Diana, the goddess of the hunt, on the bell. Other plaques in the park honor additional chapters in Lexington's history. As we stroll along Lexington Street, we'll learn a little bit more about Lexington's Civil War history. During the war, the area surrounding Lexington was known as a center for Cantrell's raiders and other Southern guerrilla forces. 2 months after the war ended, several of them decided to turn themselves in for a pardon in Lexington. While riding into town, reportedly under a white flag, they skirmished with federal soldiers. One of them was shot and several wounded, but escaped and later gained legendary status as a bank robber and outlaw. His name? Jesse James. Another notorious guerrilla named Archie Clements met a grim end here in Lexington just after the Civil War. Little Archie, at just over 5 feet tall and weighing a whopping 130 pounds, had been described as Bloody Bill Anderson's head devil. He played an active role in both the 1863 raid on Lawrence, Kansas, and the massacre of Union soldiers in Centralia, Missouri. He and others were in Lexington in the fall of 1866, causing trouble and intimidating voters in the November election. Federal troops rode into town from Sedalia to capture him, and on December of 1866, Archie left a saloon on Main Street, hopped on his horse, and rode down Franklin Avenue to get out of town. A federal soldier stationed on the second floor of the courthouse shot him dead as he rode by. Insult must have been added to injury because the lawman who later was involved wrote to the court and said that he disclosed that Clements had been hit 33 or 34 times. Down the street to us and just to the right of the new theater building once stood a brewery. The brewery itself was founded in 1875 and could produce 50 barrels of beer a day by 1912. The 18th Amendment in 1919 ended the legal production of alcohol here. But in 1929, the former brewery was raided by federal agents who found 30,000 gallons of mash and copper stills capable of producing 1,000 gallons of whiskey a day. The chief perpetrators apparently escaped through a trapdoor leading into a tunnel. The building on the northeast corner here of Franklin, 11th and Franklin, is one of the oldest commercial buildings in downtown Lexington. It probably dates back to the 1840s or 1850s. Around the turn of the century, it housed the French-Italian Cooperative Store, one of several businesses that catered to the needs of a flood of European immigrants who came to work in the coal mines surrounding Lexington. Ahead of us is the 1939 Lexington Auditorium and Civic Center, called by many in town the Lex. Built by the Works Progress Administration during the Depression, the rounded entry on this building and lettering above the door are all representative of the Art Deco style. For decades, the auditorium hosted everything from dance recitals to dance recitals to rock concerts. In 2010, a campaign was begun to restore the auditorium to a state-of-the-art community center. The building across the street from us here on Franklin once housed a blacksmith's business. In fact, as we walk down the street here just a little bit, you can still see a door on the lower level of 11th Street that allowed wagons to enter the building. In 2007, this large mural was painted on the wall that depicts the history of Lexington. On our right is the 1905 City Hall building. This building is constructed in a Beaux Arts style and features an unusual lighted floating dome and observation deck. This dome was used for civil defenses during World War II. The City Hall originally housed the fire department and its horse-drawn vehicles. The former jail in the basement of the building was designated as a fallout shelter during the Cold War. It's now been beautifully restored and called Lafayette Hall and is part of the Lafayette County court system. As we cross 10th Street, we see Presbyterian Disciples Church. The original Greek revival structure was built in 1844 on land donated by pioneer merchant James All, who lived where the education wing of the building is now located. In 1846, All took a trading caravan down the Santa Fe Trail to Mexico. After being caught up in the Mexican War, he opened a store in Chihuahua where he was killed by bandits. The church bell tower with its ornate cast iron cupola was added later. Here on this corner of 10th and Franklin is the current Lexington City Hall building. It's located in a former bank building. The carved stone sign in front of the building was over the entrance of the original 1905 City Hall. This 1847 home originally began as a Greek revival house and was later Victorianized with Italianate and Second Empire features. Here at 1901 Franklin, on this corner, is a small building from the 1860s that was once known as the Monument Shop. It was a German-American stoneworking business which may account for the unique Jacobean features on the front, including the niche inserts and stepped profile. The tombstones in the front advertised the products available inside the building at the time. On this corner of 9th and Franklin once stood the Grand Opera House that was built in the 1880s. It was converted to a silent movie theater before burning in 1924. What became the Dunbrook Apparel Corporation, still a well-known brand of sportswear, was founded at this location. Also on this corner, it is said that slave auctions were once held in the 1840s through the 1860s. As we walk along the street here, we'll learn a little bit more about Judge John Ryland. Judge Ryland was a Missouri Supreme Court justice and the deciding vote in the infamous Dred Scott decision that was affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1857. It is often cited as one of the causes of the Civil War. Here at the intersection of 9th and Main Streets is an Italianate building that was originally the Alexander Mitchell Bank. In 1866, it was the second bank robbed by the celebrated James Gang. It came away with about $2,000 and a small gold watch. From the inscription on the watch, they discovered that it belonged to the little daughter of Lexington banker William Limerick. Always concerned about public relations, the gang returned the watch along with a letter of apology. Her descendants still have that watch today. Here's another Italianate commercial building that once housed the banking firm of William Limerick. Mr. Limerick made his fortune outfitting settlers and traders on the Santa Fe Trail and built a grand home just southeast of Lexington that is now called Linwood Hall. As we continue walking down Main Street, we see this big Greek Revival building. It was built in 1847 as the fifth branch of the Missouri State Bank. By the time of the Civil War, it had become the Farmers Bank of Missouri. In 1861, federal troops confiscated nearly $1 million in state education funds that were on deposit here. Most of the money, though, was returned later. For many years, the building was an elegant private residence, but after 1900, it became the Elks Lodge. As we briefly leave the downtown area, let's talk about another tale about the Jesse James Gang. In 1874, just across the river from Lexington, the James Gang held up the omnibus that carried passengers from the train station to the Lexington ferry. A woman who knew the James boy was a witness to the robbery and chewed them out for stooping so low as to rob a bus. They admitted that this was a bit small for them and returned watches to two of the male passengers and agreed not to rob the only woman on board. One of the passengers was a young Kentucky man on his way to Lexington to establish a boys' school in the former Cumberland Presbyterian Church. He lost his fine coat and vest to the robbers, but said he was exceedingly glad to have had it been robbed by first-class artists and men of national reputation. In this small park on the northeast corner of Highland and Broadway stands the Madonna of the Trail statue. She's looking out west over the Missouri River Valley. 12 of these statues were placed by the Daughters of the American Revolution in each of the states along the National Old Trails Road from Maryland to California. They honor the courage of the pioneer women in Western movement. This Lexington statue was dedicated in 1928 by then Jackson County Judge and future President Harry S. Truman, who at that time was head of the National Old Trails Association. The Lafayette Lexington chapter of the Daughters of American Republic was long-read efforts to maintain and restore this monument. There's some other markers in this park that commemorate the Potawatomi Trail of Death. In the fall of 1838, 850 members of the Potawatomi tribe were rounded up by U.S. soldiers and forcibly relocated from Indiana to Kansas. They crossed the Missouri River here in Lexington in October of that year, and more than 40 died during the march. As we walk back up Broadway Street, we'll learn a little bit more about the history of Lexington. Broadway did lead down to the ferry and the steamboat landing on the Missouri River and once was a bustling street lined with warehouses and general stores. At this site, near this site, once stood a large three-story building that was erected in 1853 and called Arcane Hall. The first floor was a warehouse with meeting rooms above for secret rituals of the Masonic and Oddfellow lodges. When federal troops occupied Lexington in the late summer and fall of 1861, leading citizens suspected as secessionists were temporarily imprisoned in Arcana Hall. As late as 1897, the building was the site of the 6th Annual Missouri Poultry Association exhibition. This 1830s log house, which originally stood on Highland Avenue, about a block west of here, where it overlooked the ferry landing, was discovered in 1982 under the siding of a house that was about to be torn down. Members of the Lexington Historical Association disassembled it, numbered the pieces, and re-erected it back on this site. The structure is known to date from at least the 1830s because a mouse's nest with pieces of newspaper from that decade were found under the house. It has since served as a museum, artist gallery, antique shop, and is now a private residence. As we head back up Main Street, here's some more history about Lexington. At this spot, a German blacksmith named Christian Mail was murdered in broad daylight in May of 1862. He died with a single stab wound to the heart. A man named William Jilton killed him using a 25-cent knife. The motive for this bold crime was believed to have been that Mail, like most German Americans, was a loyal Union supporter who had served a 3-month stint in the Federal Army. Jilton was convicted and sentenced to prison, but a few years later he wrote to his lawyer and said, "Dear sir, to remain here unless some of those outside shall take hold of the matter and make a move for my release, nothing's going to happen." Several leading Lexington senators petitioned the governor for Jilton's release, and he was pardoned. Some believe that Jilton had something on them that allowed him to get pardoned. One of the buildings here on the left side of the Main Street once was a nightclub that during the days of Prohibition was wide open and allowed for alcohol to be served. It attracted everyone from Kansas City mob bosses to college students from Columbia. It's said that jazz legend Count Basie sometimes came here to play during his Kansas City years before he moved on to Chicago and New York and international fame. From the late 19th century through the early 20th century and beyond, this block here on the south side of the street of Main Street was once known as Block 42. Now that's not a block number, it's just what it was, or a street number, it's just what was on the maps at the time. But nevertheless, there were about 12 saloons at one time on this block with 2 restaurants, 2 barber shops, and a billiard parlor. Some of the upper houses of the buildings housed bordellos and gambling dens. Across the street from us is a building that once housed the a movie theater as well as the Fraternal Order of Eagles. And that building also once stood as the headquarters of General Sterling Price during the Battle of Lexington in 1861. Here around 930 Main once stood the headquarters firm of Russell, Majors and Waddell. In the 1850s, this company had a huge freighting business that supplied all government forts in the West. Russell's Waddell also later formed the Pony Express and hoped to get the mail contract to California. And they did by having about an 18-month stint with ponies driving across from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. I hope you enjoyed this Wandering Walks of Wonder history tour here in downtown Lexington, Missouri. Make sure to hit your like and subscribe button, and we will see you on our next Wandering Walks of Wonder adventure. Take care now. Bye bye.